The frozen road and the girl in red boots' ice was starting to crack. It had been a cold winter morning, colder than most. Cars slid slowly across the frozen roads, their tires whispering against the thin coat of snow. People moved quickly, heads down, shoulders tight. No one stopped for anything. No one looked up except her. She wasn't supposed to be there. Her name was Emily, a quiet 19-year-old who had just finished a long night shift at the hospital cafeteria. She wore red boots, too big for her feet, hand-me-downs from her mother. She walked slower than most, not because she was lazy, but because her mind was always somewhere far, somewhere thoughtful. She noticed things, like the sound of a weak engine, struggling, like the cry of a dog under a bench, and now like a dark figure leaning against the bridge rail up ahead. At first, she thought it was just another tourist, maybe someone taking photos of the frozen lake. But something didn't feel right. The figure wasn't moving. As she got closer, she saw a man in a thick black coat, breathing heavily, one hand on his chest, the other gripping the edge of the bridge. He looked pale. His lips were slightly blue. She slowed down. Then she saw his face. It was him. Her heart skipped. Her feet stopped. Keanu Reeves, his head barely turned. His eyes were distant, foggy. He was shaking. "Sir, are you okay?" He didn't answer. His body shifted, and for a second, she saw his knees buckle. She rushed forward, catching his arm just as he started to fall sideways toward the ice-covered river below. "No, no, no," she said, holding him with all her strength. He was heavy. She felt the cold bite through his coat. "Stay with me." He tried to speak. All that came out was a whisper. "My chest." Panic surged through her. "Do you have a phone?" she asked, digging through her own bag. Her fingers trembled, but not from the cold. He nodded weakly, but couldn't move. She called 911. Her voice shook as she gave the dispatcher her location. Her other hand never let go of his. "Help is coming," she whispered, crouching beside him. She took off her own scarf and wrapped it around his neck. She didn't even think twice. He blinked at her, slowly. There was something behind his tired eyes. Pain, yes, but also confusion. "And maybe your trust." "Why are you helping me?" he asked, barely audible. "Because you're human," she replied, brushing snow off his hair. "And because someone once helped my dad when he couldn't breathe. I never got to thank them. Maybe this is my chance." The ambulance came 10 minutes later. She stayed with him till they arrived, even when her knees went numb, even when she couldn't feel her fingers anymore. When they lifted him into the back, the medic turned to her. "You saved his life," he said. Emily nodded quietly and walked away. She didn't want to be seen. She didn't do it for attention. She didn't even tell them her name. But Keanu never forgot her face. 20 for hours later, Emily was back at the hospital. She had spilled hot soup on her arm during her shift and was sitting silently in the waiting area, bandaged up, looking at her red boots. That's when everything changed. A nurse came running, breathless. "Is there an Emily here?" "Emily with the red boots." Everyone turned. She stood slowly. "Yes." The nurse's eyes were wide. "He's asking for you." "Who?" "The man you saved. Keanu Reeves. He's awake, and he won't stop asking for the girl in red boots." The room went quiet. Emily's mouth fell open slightly. She hadn't told anyone, not even her co-workers. "How did he know my name?" she whispered. "He didn't," the nurse said with a smile. "But he remembered your boots." Emily followed the nurse down the hallway. Each step felt unreal, like walking through a dream. Outside the room, she paused. Her heart beat loudly in her ears. Inside, Keanu Reeves sat up in bed, hooked to monitors, looking weak but very much alive. When he saw her, he smiled faintly. "You came," he said. Emily nodded, unsure of what to say. "They told me your scarf helped keep me warm, and your voice. I remember your voice. You don't owe me anything," she said gently. "I know," he replied, "but maybe I owe you everything." His words caught her off guard. Her eyes welled up. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Emily." "Emily," he repeated. "I want to tell you something, and then I want to ask you something big." She frowned slightly. "What do you want to ask me?" He looked at her with a strange mix of gratitude and something deeper. I want to change your life, asterisk the stranger's offer. Emily stood frozen in the hospital room, the door slightly ajar behind her. Her fingers clutched the edge of her coat, unsure whether to sit down or walk back out. Keanu Reeves had just said he wanted to change her life. She hadn't expected that. Why me? She asked, her voice a little shaky, her eyes full of confusion. Keanu leaned back on the hospital pillow, his face pale but peaceful. The lines on his forehead softened as he looked at her. Because no one else stopped. Because you didn't ask for anything. Because when I thought the world didn't care anymore, you did. Emily didn't know how to reply. Part of her wanted to cry. Another part wanted to laugh. It all felt too strange, too big. Like a movie she wasn't supposed to be in. I'm just a hospital worker, she said. I serve food and clean tables. Keanu smiled gently. And you saved a life, he said. You saved mine. There was a silence, not the awkward kind. It felt sacred, honest. Then he spoke again. Emily, I don't make promises often, but I want to help you, not just with money, not just with attention. I want to understand what you dream about, what you're afraid of, what you've given up. She looked at the floor. I used to draw, she said quietly, when I was a kid. I thought maybe I'd be an artist one day. Then my dad got sick. Mom worked double shifts. I started helping. With bills, art didn't seem important anymore. Keanu listened, eyes locked on hers. Do you still draw? Only on paper napkins sometimes, when I'm bored. Do you have anything you've kept? She shook her head. I threw them out, years ago. Keanu sat up straighter. Then I want you to start again, he said firmly. From this moment on, I'll take care of your rent for 1 year. I'll give you a space to work. I'll introduce you to people who can guide you. No strings. Just live again. Emily's lips trembled. Her mind couldn't believe what she was hearing. Why are you doing this? She asked. He looked down, silent for a moment, then said something that changed everything. Because once, someone believed in me when I had nothing, and I never got to repay them. Maybe this is how I do it now. The next few days passed like a blur. Keanu kept his word. A lawyer visited Emily's small apartment and handed her a lease paid in full for 12 months. Her landlord looked shocked. The rent came with a note, for the girl who wears red boots and gives more than she has. A black car picked her up 2 days later and drove her to a quiet art studio, nestled between two cafes downtown. The studio was small but filled with light. Blank canvases were stacked by the windows. Pencils, brushes, paint all brand new. A letter waited for her on the desk. Dear Emily, this space is yours, for silence, for dreams, for healing. Draw like no one is watching, because someone always is. Keanu stared at the letter for a long time. Her hands shook slightly as she touched the edges. She had never known a kindness like this. But with the gift came doubt. What if I'm not good enough anymore? She whispered to herself. What if this is a mistake? Her first night in the studio was spent sitting on the floor, sketching quietly, tears running down her face. Not from sadness but from something deeper. Release. She drew the bridge, the snow, his coat, her red boots, and his eyes. The eyes of a man who had once been broken, and now was trying to help someone rebuild. 3 weeks later, Keanu invited Emily to meet him again. This time, it was different. He wasn't wearing a hospital gown. He looked stronger, calmer. They met at a small park near the edge of the city. He brought coffee. She brought her sketchbook. How's the studio? He asked. Quiet, she said, but it helps. Can I see what you've made? She hesitated. It's not great. It doesn't have to be, he replied. She opened the book slowly, page by page. As he looked, his expression changed. From curiosity to quiet awe. Her drawings weren't just pictures. They were feelings, shadows, scars, and hope. One sketch caught his eye the moment she caught him on the bridge. Her arms stretched, his body falling, snow swirling in slow motion. He tapped the page. This, he said softly. This is real. She nodded. That was the moment that changed everything. Keanu closed the sketchbook and looked at her. Emily, I think you're not just healing yourself. You're telling stories people need to see. She looked away, unsure what to say. What if, he continued slowly, We show these to the world. Her heart jumped. You mean like an exhibition? Yes, he said. But not just art, your story. The moment you chose kindness. The moment your life shifted. Others need to know it's never too late to start again. Emily was quiet. Are you sure people would care? She asked. Keanu smiled. They'll care because it's real. Because you're not perfect. Because you saved a man's life and found your own in the process. Tears welled up in her eyes again. She whispered, okay. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She sat by the window of her tiny apartment, looking up at the stars. A month ago, she was invisible. Now, someone saw her, not because of fame, not because of likes or followers, but because she had done something good without expecting anything, and somehow, the universe noticed. But not everyone was happy. 3 streets away, inside a noisy bar, a man named Derek slammed his drink on the counter. He had known Emily for years. They once worked together. He remembered when she begged for extra shifts to afford medicine for her father. And now she was suddenly famous. No one had helped him when he struggled. No one gave him a studio. His eyes burned with envy. He took out his phone and opened social media. A photo of Emily standing outside the art studio had started making rounds. Some users were calling her the miracle girl. Others wrote comments, like Keanu's angel. Derek gritted his teeth. Let's see how long that miracle lasts, he muttered. He pressed record. The next day, Emily's inbox was flooded with messages. Some were kind, but one video started going viral and it wasn't one she made. Derek's voice echoed across the internet. This girl? She's no hero. She used to steal leftover food from the cafeteria. She lied to her boss. She's just lucky Keanu Reeves was desperate that day. Emily stared at the screen. Her hands went cold. And just like that, the world that lifted her up was ready to tear her down. Storm after sunlight there felt heavier that morning. Emily sat on the edge of her bed, clutching her phone. The screen glowed softly with dozens of notifications. Her social media feed, once filled with messages of praise and encouragement, had turned into a battlefield overnight. Derek's video had gone viral. It was shot in a dark corner of the bar, with his face half lit, as if he wanted to be seen and not seen at the same time. He spoke with certainty. His voice was low, his tone mocking. She's not who you think she is, he said. I knew her before the cameras, before Keanu. She's just pretending to be something she's not. Don't fall for the boots and tears act. The comments came fast. Is this true? I knew she seemed too sweet. They always come out of nowhere and take advantage of good people. Emily felt her chest tighten. Her hands trembled. She had no idea how to respond. She hadn't asked for any of this. She didn't want attention. She never even told the world what she did. Others had shared it for her. And now, the world was turning cold. She called her best friend, Maya, who worked part-time at a bookshop. They're calling me fake, Emily said, her voice cracking. Maya didn't hesitate. You're not fake, Em. You helped someone. That's real. People forget kindness fast, especially when someone bitter hands them a new story. Should I say something online? Maya paused. Only if it helps you. Not them. Meanwhile, Keanu was filming again. His manager had booked him on a tight schedule, and though his body was stronger, his mind kept drifting back to Emily. He had seen the video too. He had heard Derek's voice. He knew that voice, the kind that didn't understand grace, the kind that tried to pull people back into the mud when they dared to rise. He picked up his phone and called his assistant. Set up an interview, he said. With who? Someone who listens. Someone who doesn't twist words. He leaned forward, rubbing his forehead. We need to tell the real story, not mine, hers. By evening, Emily stepped into her art studio and locked the door behind her. She needed to be alone. Her sketchbook lay open on the table, but she couldn't bring herself to draw. The colors didn't speak today. The silence was louder than ever. She sat on the floor and pressed her head against the cold wall. Tears slid down her cheeks. Quietly, she whispered things no one could. Here, I didn't lie. I just wanted to help. Why does the world hate kindness? There was a knock on the door. She didn't move. A second knock, gentler. Emily, came a voice. It was Keanu. She wiped her face and stood up slowly, opening the door. He stood there in a gray hoodie and jeans, no cameras, no fanfare, just a man who had once been saved by her. "I'm sorry," she said at once, looking down. "I didn't want this to happen." Keanu stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "I saw the video," he said. She nodded. "It hurts." "Of course it does," he said. "But pain is not proof that you did something wrong. Sometimes it's proof you did something right." She looked at him. "I don't know how to fight back." "Maybe you don't have to," he said. "Maybe I can." He sat down across from her, legs crossed. "I booked an interview. They'll ask me about what happened on the bridge. I'm going to tell them everything." Emily shook her head. "That'll only make things worse." "No," he replied. "Not if we're honest. Not if we show them the truth." She hesitated. "Will anyone believe us?" Keanu looked at her with calm certainty. "We're not here to make them believe us. We're here to remind them that stories don't have to be perfect to be real." The interview aired 3 days later. Keanu sat on a simple chair, wearing a black sweater, no makeup, no lights in his eyes. He spoke softly, but each word carried weight. "A month ago, I almost passed out on a bridge," he said. "I couldn't breathe. I didn't even know if I wanted to." He paused, and then a girl stopped. She didn't scream. She didn't take a selfie. She wrapped her scarf around my neck, held my hand, and said, "Stay with me." The interviewer leaned in. "And who was she?" Keanu smiled. "Her name is Emily, and she saved my life." He went on to describe what she had done, how she had stayed with him, how she walked away without even telling anyone. Someone filmed her coming out of a studio. He continued, "And now people are saying she's a liar, that she did it for attention. Let me be clear, she never asked for anything. She gave everything." Then he added something unexpected. "I want you to meet her." The camera cut to Emily, sitting quietly across from him. She wore her red boots. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her face looked nervous. But when she spoke, the world leaned in. "I didn't know he was famous," she began. "I just saw someone in pain, and I remembered my father. I remembered how helpless I felt when he was gasping for air. No one stopped that day, so this time, I did." The interviewer looked at her gently. "Did you steal food from the cafeteria, like the video claims?" Emily looked straight into the camera. "I did. Twice. For my mom. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. I told my boss. I got suspended. I paid it back later." A silence followed. "I'm not perfect," she said, "but I am honest." Keanu reached over and took her hand. "And you're brave," he said. The clip was shared across the internet in hours. But something strange happened this time. The comments were different. She owned her truth. "That takes guts. We've all made mistakes. Not all of us save lives." Those red boots are a symbol now. Derek watched the interview from the same bar. He stared at the screen, his drink untouched. Someone beside him muttered, "Guess she's not fake after all." He didn't respond. He felt small, not because he had been caught, but because she didn't fight back. She just told the truth, and it hurt more than any punch. He turned off his phone. The next morning, someone knocked on Emily's apartment door. It was the gallery owner from downtown, a woman named Claire. She had seen the interview. "I want to host your first exhibition," Claire said. "We'll call it The Bridge." Emily's breath caught. "Why?" Claire smiled. "Because you helped someone not fall. Now it's your turn to rise." The bridge becomes a stage. Emily stood in the middle of the gallery, her hands gently pressed together in front of her, surrounded by white walls and her own drawings. The place was quiet for now. The opening night was still a few hours away. The only sound was the soft hum of lights above, shining down on what she once thought were forgotten dreams. A large canvas hung near the entrance. It showed the moment she reached out on the bridge, the wind pulling her scarf, snowflakes floating like tiny stars, and Keanu's body halfway between falling and being saved. It wasn't polished. The lines were rough in places, but the emotion, raw, real, impossible to ignore. A handwritten label under the painting read, "The moment I stopped walking and started living." Emily's eyes welled up again, not from sadness this time, but from a deep feeling of gratitude she still couldn't name. Behind her, a soft voice spoke, "You okay?" She turned to see Keanu leaning against the doorway, dressed simply in jeans and a black jacket. No cameras, no assistants, just him. I don't know, she said honestly. Part of me feels like this is all a dream. The other part is terrified someone's going to walk in and say I don't belong here. Keanu stepped closer. Belonging doesn't come from permission, he said gently. It comes from purpose, and your purpose is clear to everyone who sees this. Emily looked down at her paint-stained hands. But what if I mess up? What? If no one comes? Keanu smiled. Then we'll sit in this room together and look at your art in silence, and it will still be worth it. She laughed softly. You always know the right thing to say. No, he said, but I do know the truth when I see it. As the sun began to set, people started arriving. They came slowly at first, some out of curiosity, others because they had seen the interview. Within an hour, the gallery was full. Journalists, students, artists, nurses, families, even strangers who had once walked by her without a glance were now standing still, staring at the pieces on the wall. Each painting told a story. One showed a tired hospital cafeteria at midnight, lit only by a vending machine. Another showed her mother lying on a worn couch, covered with blankets, eyes full of quiet sorrow. And another, titled Boots, was simply a pair of red boots sitting by a window, with light falling on them like a spotlight. People didn't just look, they felt. Some cried, some smiled, some stood in silence for a long time, hands pressed to their chests. A young girl walked up to Emily with her sketchbook. I want to draw too, she said, but people laugh at my drawings. Emily knelt down. To her level. You draw for you, she whispered, not for their laughter. One day, they'll stop laughing, and they'll start listening. The girl nodded, eyes wide with hope. Keanu watched the scene from a distance. A quiet pride filled his chest, not for anything he had done but for what she was becoming. Then something unexpected happened. Derek showed up. He walked into the gallery with slow steps, hands in his pockets, eyes unsure. People turned, some recognizing him from the video. The air shifted. Emily noticed him. Her heart jumped, but not with fear. Not anymore. She walked over to him calmly. They stood face to face for the first time since he tried to ruin her. He didn't speak at first. Then he said, I'm sorry. Emily said nothing. I was angry, he continued. Life didn't go the way I wanted. And when I saw you being noticed, I felt invisible. She nodded slowly. You tried to make me small, she said, so you could feel bigger. His face flushed with shame. I know, he whispered. And it didn't work. You just kept growing. Emily looked around the gallery, then back at him. Because kindness can't be killed, she said gently. Even when it's quiet, it finds a way to speak. Derek lowered his head. I don't expect you to forgive me. I already did, she replied. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It just means I'm free. He looked up, surprised. Thank you, he said quietly, and then turned to leave. As he reached the door, she added, you can stay, if you want to learn. He paused. Then nodded and joined the crowd in silence. Later that night, Keanu walked Emily home. They strolled down the same road where they had first met. The bridge loomed ahead, covered in snow once more. Do you want to walk across it? He asked. Emily nodded. They stepped onto the frozen wood slowly, the world around them hushed by the snow. It feels smaller now, she said, because you've grown. Keanu replied. They stopped in the middle. This was where it had all begun. I almost died here, he said, and I almost walked past you, she answered. They both smiled. Thank you for not walking past, he whispered. Emily looked up at the stars. Thank you for not letting me fade away. They stood together for a moment, no words needed. The snow fell around them like soft applause. And somewhere in the distance, a girl picked up a pencil for the first time in weeks, because of a pair of red boots and a quiet act of bravery. The letter on the doorstep. 3 weeks had passed since Emily's exhibition opened. The gallery was still open every evening, and people kept coming. Teachers, mothers with strollers, teenage boys in hoodies, even older men with folded newspapers under their arms. Some said nothing and just stared. Others left handwritten notes and folded drawings at the corner table near the exit. Claire, the gallery owner, had even started collecting them. We're going to publish these one day. She told Emily, you've started something. People don't want it to end. But something had changed in Emily too. She was still kind, still quiet, still wore her red boots. But now, there was something stronger in the way she walked, something more certain in her hands when she drew. Even the way she held her pencil felt different, like she wasn't afraid to press harder anymore. But just as she was beginning to find peace again, something appeared that stirred her world. All over, one early morning, as snow fell lightly outside her window, she opened her apartment door to find a letter on the doormat. No envelope, just a folded paper with her name written in shaky handwriting. Emily. Her hands tensed as she picked it up. She slowly unfolded it and read the first line. You don't know me, but I knew your father. She sat down on the floor, heart racing. The letter continued. My name is Harold. I was the man who helped him once, many years ago, when he collapsed outside a hardware store. He could barely breathe. I stayed with him until the ambulance came. He held my hand and kept whispering, thank you. He told me he had a daughter who liked to draw birds and bridges. Emily gasped. She had forgotten that part. The letter went on. I never told anyone what happened. I disappeared into the world like so many others. But last month, I saw your face on the news. The girl who saved Keanu Reeves. The girl with the red boots. And I knew. You became the person he prayed you would become. Thank you for carrying his kindness forward. Now the world knows what I always suspected. You were meant for more. The letter was unsigned beyond the first name. No return address. Just that message. Emily clutched it to her chest and cried. But this time, it wasn't grief. It was a full circle. That evening, she showed the letter to Keanu. They sat in his apartment, modest, full of books and warm lamps. He read the letter twice, quietly, not saying anything for a while. Then he looked at her and said, he was your first bridge. She nodded. And you became mine. Keanu had an idea. Emily, he said, what if we take this further? Not just art, not just one gallery. What if we use your story to build something bigger? Like what? She asked. A space, a place for young people who feel invisible. Kids like you once were, artists, writers, dreamers. A room where they don't have to prove anything, just show up and be seen. Emily's heart fluttered. A kindness center. Keanu smiled. A bridge for those who are almost falling. Plans began that week. They found a closed-down library on the edge of town, dusty, forgotten, filled with broken shelves and spiderwebs. Most people walked past it without a second glance. But Emily saw something else. She saw potential. They cleaned it together. Her, Keanu, Maya, Claire, and a group of volunteers who had been touched by the exhibition. Walls were painted soft colors. Murals went up. One of them showed the bridge, the scarf, the red boots. Another showed hundreds of hands reaching out from different directions, holding one another. They named it the Kindness House. On opening day, Emily stood by the door, greeting each visitor with a small smile and a warm cup of tea. Keanu walked beside her, watching quietly as teenagers came in carrying notebooks, paintings, guitars, and even silence. One boy didn't speak at all. He just handed Emily a torn notebook with pencil sketches inside, pages filled with sadness and beauty. She looked at him and said, your voice is in here. You just haven't heard it yet. He nodded and walked in. The Kindness House wasn't loud. It was gentle. And sometimes, gentleness is what the world needs most. But as their little world grew, so did attention. A famous morning show invited Emily and Keanu for a special feature. The host was warm, the studio bright, and everything felt like a dream again. The host asked Emily, did you ever imagine your life would look like this? She shook her head, smiling. No. I thought it would be cafeteria trays and long bus rides forever. I thought kindness didn't matter anymore. The host leaned forward. And what changed that? Emily glanced at Keanu, then back at the camera. Someone believed in my small act and helped me turn it into something bigger than both of us. But not everyone watching smiled. In a tall building across the city, a woman named Nadia watched the interview with narrowed eyes. She had once been an art critic, a powerful one. Now, she ran a podcast and called herself a truth speaker. She hated the idea of emotion replacing excellence. She believed only trained artists should be celebrated. She picked up her microphone and said, "This kindness girl is charming. But art, this isn't art. It's emotional manipulation wrapped in media." She posted the episode. By evening, her followers flooded Emily's page. "You're not even that talented. Keanu's just being nice. This is what happens. When feelings replace real skill." Emily read them quietly. Her chest tightened again. Maya told her to ignore them. Keanu said, "Don't let them define your worth." But the words lingered, and late that night, alone in the studio, Emily started erasing one of her drawings. A soft hand caught her wrist. She turned. Keanu had walked in, silent as snowfall. "Don't erase yourself," he said. "They're right," she whispered. "I'm not the best." He sat beside her. "No one ever said you had to be the best, only brave." She looked at him, tears brimming. "I don't want to disappoint the people who believed in me." "Then don't," he said. "But remember, believing in yourself has to come first." Emily left the studio that night without finishing the drawing. She walked to the bridge. The snow had started again. This time, she stood not as a stranger, not as a scared girl, but as someone who had crossed the other side. She pulled out her scarf and tied it to the bridge rail. It fluttered in the wind, like a flag, not of surrender, but of remembrance. And from behind her, quiet footsteps approached. Not Keanu. Not Maya. Not anyone she knew. A woman with gray hair and tired eyes stood beside her. "I saw your scarf," she said. "I'm here because my daughter tried to jump from this bridge 3 years ago." A stranger stopped her. Emily turned to her gently. That stranger saved her. Now she paints. She smiles again. Emily felt a lump in her throat. "Thank you," the woman said. And then she walked away, leaving Emily with the wind and her scarf. Somewhere behind her, the kindness house kept its lights on. When kindness comes full circle, scarf danced in the wind like a ribbon tied to the past, present, and future. Emily stood still, her eyes closed. The soft hush of snow all around her. She didn't need music. There was a rhythm in silence now, one that taught her everything didn't have to be loud to matter. Behind her, the lights of the kindness house glowed like a steady fire. People came and went, and it was no longer just about her or even Keanu. It had become something bigger, something alive. The next morning, Emily walked through the kindness house with a mug of warm tea in her hands. The place had changed so much in just a month. There were children scribbling on walls with markers they were allowed to use, quiet teenagers reading books on bean bags, and soft jazz playing in the background. In one corner, Maya was leading a journaling session. In another, Derek was organizing paints for a group of young artists. Yes, Derek. He never tried to explain himself again. He just showed up, day after day, ready to do the work, not to fix his reputation, but to rebuild his soul. Emily smiled as she watched. The people who once doubted her were now standing beside her. Even Nadia, the bitter critic, had gone silent after receiving hundreds of letters from children and parents who had visited the kindness house. People had written to her, not with anger, but with stories. And even the harshest critics can't argue with kindness in handwriting. Then something happened that neither Emily nor Keanu had expected. A major film studio reached out. They wanted to make a movie not about Keanu but about Emily. At first, she panicked. "I'm not a star," she told Keanu, pacing her small studio. "You're not supposed to be," he replied calmly. "You're a story, and stories light candles in dark places." The studio promised full creative control. No drama, no made-up scandals, just the truth, her truth. The scarf, the bridge, the boots, the letter, the art, the kindness house. They even offered to cast real artists and real kids from the kindness house in small roles. Emily agreed. But on one condition. All proceeds from this movie go to building more kindness houses in other cities, in other forgotten corners of the world. The producers paused, then smiled. Deal. Filming began in the spring. Emily walked on set one afternoon and saw something that took her breath away. They had recreated the bridge. Every detail. The snow. The wind machine. Even a prop scarf tied to the rail. She stood in front of it quietly. Keanu walked up beside her. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "This time, I'm watching it from the outside. It feels like I've crossed into another life." "You have," he said softly. And you didn't lose yourself to get here. When the movie released, it didn't break box office records. It didn't win major awards. But it broke something else. It broke silence. It reached the homes of people who felt unseen. It whispered to children who had never told anyone about the weight they carried. And in the weeks that followed, messages poured in. I stopped someone on a bridge today. I left a scarf with a note just in case someone needed it. I finally asked for help. Thank you for showing me how. A year passed. On the anniversary of that snowy morning, Emily stood on the bridge once again. But this time, it wasn't just her. Hundreds of people had gathered. Some wore red boots. Some wore scarves. Some brought candles. They called it the Day of Pause. A day where people across the city, across the world, stopped to notice others. Some handed out warm drinks. Some simply sat and listened. Some brought drawings and pinned them to walls, fences, trees. And on that day, something beautiful happened. A little girl approached Emily. She was maybe 7 or 8, tiny, with wild curly hair and a nervous smile. She held out a crumpled drawing. It showed a tall woman with a scarf catching a man on a bridge. Is this me? Emily asked, kneeling down. The girl nodded. My mama said you're the reason I'm still here. She said you reminded her to stay. Emily took the drawing and hugged the girl gently. Behind her, Keanu stood quietly, his eyes full. He whispered to Maya, this is why we do it. As the crowd slowly began to walk away, candles still flickering in the snow, Emily remained on the bridge for a few extra minutes. She looked at the river. Then at the sky. Then at the scarf she tied again to the rail, this time with a tiny note tucked inside. To whoever reads this, you matter. Don't let the ice fool you. There is warmth ahead. That night, Keanu and Emily sat on a rooftop, looking out over the city lights. You know, he said, when you first caught me, I thought I was at the end. And now, she asked. He smiled. I think it was just the beginning. Emily leaned back, stars overhead, heart full. Funny, she whispered, I thought I saved you. He looked at her with soft eyes. Maybe we saved each other. And so, the story that began with ice and silence ended with light and voices. Not loud. Not perfect, but true. And sometimes, the quietest stories change the loudest hearts.